from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I call up my amendment number 1034. I ask that it be reported by number, and I ask consent that Senator Menendez and I each have 3 minutes to discuss this amendment.
Is there an objection? Without objection, the clerk will report.
Senator from Louisiana, Mr. Kennedy proposes amendment number 1034 to amendment number 935.
Mr. President, as we all know, the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF as we call it, it's an international bank. Most countries belong to it, 190 in fact, and every country—
Would the senator yield?
Certainly.
Order. Please order. Senators, take your conversations out of the Senate chamber. The senator may proceed.
Thank you. Virtually every country in the world is a member of the IMF. There are 190 countries. And everybody puts up money, and when another country gets in trouble, the IMF helps bail them out. Now, not every country in the IMF is equal in voting rights. The countries that put up the most money get most of the voting rights and have most of the control. And you'll not be surprised, Mr. President, to learn that the United States of America puts up over $100 billion, and we have the largest share of voting rights. Now, periodically, the IMF issues what's called special drawing rights. The technical definition of a special drawing right is an international reserve asset created by and issued by the IMF. But forget that. Let me tell you what a special drawing right is. A special drawing right is like a dividend. Think of it as a poker chip. So the IMF says we're going to give dividends or poker chips to every member of the IMF. Well, what can you do with this poker chip? Well, if you're Iran, for example, you can take this poker chip and go to the IMF and say, here's my poker chip, and I want $1.42, that's the exchange rate, of U.S. dollars, whether Iran needs it or not. Pretty sweet deal. Now, Iran would never have to pay back that money. The IMF does charge Iran interest on those U.S. dollars.
Would the senator yield? Once again, please, order on the floor. The senator may proceed.
I think you might have to put some of them in jail, Mr. President. But anyway, Iran wouldn't have to pay it back, but they have to pay an interest. But let me guess what the interest rate is. 0.05%, not 5%, 0.05%. Sweet deal for Iran, especially when they don't need the money. My amendment would simply say that the United States cannot, Secretary of Treasury, cannot vote to approve special drawing rights, or these poker chips, for any country that according to the State Department sponsors genocide or state-backed terrorism. Genocide or state-backed terrorism unless Congress approves. And I will reserve my time but yield to Senator Menendez, my good friend from New Jersey.
Mr. President.
The senior senator from New Jersey.
That only means I got there before you. Yes, Mr. President, I rise in opposition to Senator Kennedy's amendment. I have a great deal of respect for my colleague. No one in this chamber has taken a harder line against the Iranian regime than I have. No one. But in this case, a well-intended motion can produce very bad consequences. So let me speak to why I oppose the senator's amendment. These special drawing rights, I always love how my colleague from Louisiana can bring it to an earthly tone. We got poker chips we're throwing around. But these aren't quite poker chips. They're a critical liquidity tool to support lower-income countries in response to global financial crises. In our interest to do so, to create stability. They assist in creating economic stability. They are an absolutely essential part of U.S. foreign policy tool, especially as we are dealing with the China challenge. We want to help these countries instead of China helping them. The Biden administration supported a new round of special drawing rights allocations at the IMF. This funding played an essential role in helping countries address the COVID-19 pandemic and the related economic fallout of the pandemic, which we're still hearing about from many of these countries. Without these funding, many of these countries would have fallen to economic crisis, which means political instability, which means chaos, which means refugees coming to the shores of many countries. The International Monetary Fund's rules dictate that a new general issue for special drawing rights must go to all members. That means a requirement to prohibit SDRs for one country would prohibit SDRs for all countries. As a consequence, Senator Kennedy's amendment would effectively kill the possibility of issuing SDRs to any country ever again. Now, Senator Kennedy offered the same exact amendment with the Endless Frontier Act on the floor in May of 2021. That amendment failed by a significant vote. Of course, we oppose those state sponsors of terrorism. Of course, we oppose those who would be responsible for genocide. But I would note that most of our adversaries the senator wants to pursue, which I would agree if we could do it antiseptically, but we can't, already face obstacles to drawing special drawing rights because of the sanctions that we have against them. So due to the harmful impact this amendment would have on the Treasury Department to respond to a deficit in the global supply of reserves on a global crisis, I will vote no, and I would recommend my colleagues do so as well, and I would reserve the balance of my time.
Mr. President.
The senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. How much additional time do I have?
You have 20 seconds remaining.
Mr. President, this bill will not take poker chips, and that's what they are, away from any country unless they're engaging in genocide or state-sponsored terrorism. That's it. The world will not spin off its axis. If you think a country that commits genocide or state-sponsored terrorism should get poker chips, vote against this bill.
Mr. President.
The senator from New Jersey, the senior senator.
If we were talking about poker chips, I'd be all in with Senator Kennedy. What we're talking about is the ability to preserve in crisis in the world, have something we can use, and that's why the senator's amendment needs to fail.
The question is on the amendment. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso,